All right, guys, welcome to another Note to File podcast live. My name is Brad Hightower. Make sure to check us out at notetofilepodcast.com for all of our old episodes. And I'm just going to jump right in with our guests here, Kourosh and Liz. Guys, how's it going?
Hey, how are you?
Good. Glad to have you guys on. I'm super stoked. Actually, before I even get going here, I just want to have you guys do a brief intro. A lot of the guests we have on have previously been on audio podcast. You guys are new, so I always like to hear just a little bit about people's sort of backgrounds and what brought them into the clinical trial space. So if you guys would indulge me, say Liz, if you're willing to start, tell us about your clinical trial origin story, if you would.
Happy to. So, hi everyone. I'm Liz Beatty. I'm co-founder and chief strategy officer at Inato. I've actually been in clinical trials my whole career. So I started as a study coordinator at Yale back when things were all paper and I was carrying binders across town. But really great experience for me. It gave me a chance to engage directly with patients, to talk about clinical trials, to talk through with them and their families what it takes to make a decision to join a clinical trial. So really great intro for me in clinical trials. And then from there, I had a whole career at a pharmaceutical company, managing trials globally, working in patient recruitment and retention. And then last but not least, in digital clinical trials, thinking about how can tech change the way we do research today? How can we do it better for patients, for sites, for research in general? So I've been focused my whole career on this and really passionate about bringing new medicines to people around the globe. There's so much important work that needs to be done to bring new medicines forward, and I really enjoyed being a part of the clinical trial ecosystem.
Nice. I always have a little bit of a soft spot for anybody who spent time working at the site level. So kudos for that, and for Inato for including people with site level experience. Again, I think it goes a long ways. And unfortunately, for better or worse, we're still not that far from those days of lugging around binders from site to site. Yeah. Getting better, but still a ways to go. Awesome. Kourosh, tell us a bit about yourself, and I hope that I didn't butcher your name too terribly.
No, that was perfect. So I'm Kourosh. I'm co-founder and CEO of Inato. So myself, I have a tech and engineering background. I've been in tech for about 15 years. And I've been in research for 6-7 years now. But I've always had a fascination for healthcare. Virtually all my family are doctors, pharmacists. They've been working at sites for a very long time. I was initially thinking of becoming a doctor, and I was kind of out of the family business when I realized when I was 6 years old that whenever I would see blood, I would faint immediately. So I had to find a different path. But it's been very, very exciting. Happy, obviously, to tell you a bit more about the company. But this focus on site we've had for the last few years, not only did we get a lot of super exciting feedback and a lot of great momentum from sites, but interestingly enough, we never had as much interest from sponsors as we've had since we've had this really big focus on sites. So I feel like something is really changing that's quite exciting.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always, look, first of all, if you're a site, you're always looking for good, appropriate study opportunities, right? I mean, there's no such thing as too few good studies. It's just doesn't exist. And there seems to be, or historically has been, a little bit of a disconnect in, connecting appropriate sites with good studies. Because again, we've seen we're not at the pinnacle of clinical trial enrollment by any stretch of the imagination. There's still big gaps that exist. So I love that you guys are kind of seeming to be pulling from both sides, I guess, so to speak. But before I go too much further, I mean, yeah, just tell us about Inato and, maybe a little bit about its origins and sort of what problem you guys are trying to solve.
Yeah, so we actually started purely on the sponsor side. So when we launched Inato, initially we were building a tool for pharma companies to improve the way they do site selection. The basic idea was they've been relationship-based for a long time. How can we make it more data-driven? And this initially was a demand from sponsors. And what we realized maybe 2-3 years in was that no matter the amount of data we were providing to pharma companies, they were still reaching the same conclusion, which was Dana-Farber seems to have a lot of experience. Let's go there. So we did this for a few years, and during this whole process, what was fascinating to us is we realized there were thousands and thousands of smaller sites that were neither the big academic sites nor the very naive, like your own GP, that wanted to get access to more trials. They had access to the most diverse populations, to the naive patients, and through this traditional site selection process, they just couldn't get highlighted. They couldn't build the trust necessary to get selected. And what we were seeing on the sponsor side is they were very much aware of this issue, of this kind of vicious circle of we're working with the top 5% of sites. They're doing the vast majority of trials. We know that if we want to expand patient access, we need to go beyond. But with the traditional approach, they just didn't feel comfortable enough taking a bet on a new site.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think it's something, I mean, it's oddly, I guess, validating to hear that in a way from you, even though it doesn't really take any less sting out of it. But, you know, I operate small sites. I talk to a lot of people who have smaller sites. They're in their communities. They know them very well. They want to bring trial opportunities, but struggle, you know, with that because, again, to your point, a lot of sponsors won't take a chance. So it's interesting to hear that, you know, trying to go with a more data-driven approach still kind of led them back to the same mistakes in a way. But so you're having to flip that a little bit and not keep going back to the same well again, right? These places are great institutions, you know, there's no question about that. But even then, they've only got so much throughput that they can handle, right? So
yeah,
again, I know that's something that's been an assumption, I guess, maybe on my part. So it's kind of interesting to hear that validated, and the sponsors recognize that.
Yeah, what was so fascinating too is so many sites came to us through this process. So we were the intermediary and would say, you know, I didn't have a trial for this patient population, so I have no competition. I actually have a lot of these patients. I'm highly motivated to do this trial, but I wasn't selected. And in many cases, I never even heard back what the outcome was of the feasibility process. So we knew right away that there was a need to expand access, which is part of our mission, expanding access to patients in the communities where they live. To expand access at the site level is the first step, because those are the trusted resources for patients to gain access into trials. And if they can't even get selected, it just continues the same problem we've had in clinical trials where, you know, very few patients ever participate in trials or even get told about them or have to travel very long distances to participate. So there was a great opportunity for us to really change the dynamic and put the sites in the driver's seat to get the trials that were the right fit for them and their patients.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I think, I guess before I go too much further, I mean, what do you think, or what have you guys experienced has been, what's the hesitancy with sponsors working more with these types of sites? I know maybe we're seeing a little bit more of an uptick, but I still think there's a lot of people, like, again, who reach out to me who are like, I can't get studies. I can't get a sponsor to award me. The guy doesn't have, maybe my PI doesn't have that much experience, or, you know, but they've got a great team around them or whatever. There's a million different, you know, caveats to that. But why do you think there's been that hesitancy? Is there anything specific that really holds sponsors back? Is it awareness of these sites, or is it truly that they're, you know, don't feel that they may be fully qualified?
I think honestly, it's the complexity of finding the right trial for the right site, meaning they're completely aligned with the idea that we need to give chances to more sites. It's just, how do you make sure that you start with the right one and you don't start with the super complex phase 2 studies with overnight stays, etc. And if you think about it from the sponsor side, just the fact of checking what are the basic requirements, are we confident that the site has enough patients, this is so time consuming, so complex. And as you know, the whole process of the feasibility questionnaire, they do not trust any of what's inside, that they end up just reaching the conclusion of, well, we don't really know if this site is really capable, yes or no, so let's not take a risk.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been probably issues with the feasibility process. I know that's something you guys have your own spin on too, which, you know, before we get too much further, if this is a good time, and we can launch into a little bit of a look at the platform, maybe a sort of brief demo, if you would. You guys good?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. And there's a few comments out here. You guys, if you're watching, please feel free to add comments, questions. What I love about these is they're engaging, and we get some audience feedback. So by all means, I'm going to go ahead and throw the stream up here.
Yeah. So a bit of context on the landing page for sites. So this is typically the first page a site would see after joining Inato. So the process itself of joining Inato is extremely simple and super short. It's basically focused on what are your interests as a site. So there's no time wasted on share all your experiences, share your patient population, the CVs, all this. Initially, it's just about help us understand what type of trials are the most interesting to you, and we're going to do our best to basically recommend the right trial so you can focus your time on the ones that are the most interesting to you, and you're not wasting time on a study that anyhow you have no chances of getting selected in at this point.
Yeah.
Well, and that alone is a big deal, right? Sometimes you're signing up for these different platforms or opportunities, and the first step is like the hardest, right? Which is filling out pages and pages, or having to pull numbers on all kinds of populations all up front before you can even get in to be considered in the first place. So you're not necessarily burdening sites up front with having to pull numbers on 25 different patient populations, right? I mean, it's an abbreviated entry point, and then you get to those different questions as you progress.
Exactly. So this very, very simple idea behind the entirety of the platform is flipping the model for sites. So meaning, instead of having the sponsor decide we're going to pre-screen and eliminate 90% of sites and just focus on sending the feasibility questionnaire to a few sites, the idea here is, as a site, you can get access to anything, and you're the one making the decision, do I want to spend time on this trial or not? So what you basically see here, you have three main categories. There's the trials to discover. So those are the new trials available on the platform. What, by the way, I'm showing here, this is the new version that is coming out in May. So this is completely brand new. And what you have in this section are the trials that are live in the platform, meaning not only are the sponsors looking for community sites through Inato, but they have typically saved a number of seats for sites. So say they are selecting 100 sites in a given country, we're working with sponsors and we're going to agree on, okay, 20 of those 100 sites are going to be booked or pre-booked for community sites.
Nice.
So what you see here is you have the trials that are ready for sites to review. We're going to show at the top the new ones. We're going to show the ones that are the best match for sites. And this is a really important concept where the more you're active in the platform, the better the recommendations are going to become. And this is based on the trials you've pursued in the past, the trials you were accepted in, the trials you declined, and the preferences you shared initially. So at a high level, you're going to have all the different trials that are available. And as you can see here, you already have a percentage of the application that is pre-filled based on the past data that you have shared with us on past studies. So the whole idea of Inato is you're going to share study information while applying to a given study, not just pre-fill a big profile, but then all this information is going to be reused in future trials.
Nice. Yeah, there's nothing more frustrating than filling out basically the same 30-page feasibility form for the same sponsor that you just already have 3 studies with. So I love that, it can carry over the relevant things and just leave you the parts that, maybe specific to that protocol. Again, that alone is seemingly simple, but pretty big deal, I think, because again, you get really bogged down with filling out these same answers over and over again. So I like that.
Yeah, and it is, to your point, it's seemingly simple. It was actually quite complex because the complexity is aligning sponsors on standardizing kind of the key criteria, the key questions. And so what we've done is the sponsor can absolutely tweak what are the most important requirements, but all the rest is standardized. It's not like a one-off feasibility questionnaire, which is the main reason why sponsors today aren't able to reuse it. It's always like unstructured questionnaire, and there's a new one for the study.
Yeah, I've wondered, because there's nothing more frustrating than like, hey, IQVIA, I don't know how many times I tell you we have a -20 freezer, and we still have a -20 freezer, and we did last month, and we did last year, and we did all in between those times. So yeah, no, I can appreciate that.
So moving forward, those are the trials that are available. There's a new section that we're really excited about, which are the upcoming trials. What those are basically trials that are not yet available because the sponsor hasn't yet launched the actual site selection process, but the site can already view the early protocol draft, and they can say, I want to get notified to know when the trial actually becomes available, and I can already share some early feedback on is this trial attractive to me? Do I believe that the early draft of the protocol has some key roadblocks that the sponsor should know about? And the entire idea here is a first step towards including the sites and including the patients as early as possible in the whole design process of a study, to avoid the super frustrating step where the sites only see the protocol once it's finalized. They believe the drug is exciting, but the protocol is just unfeasible and they have to decline.
I was going to say, so does that provide some opportunity, to actually have some not influence, but maybe have some impact early on before these things may be completely finalized? Like, is there a world where feedback from sites may actually have some effect on these protocols, or is it sort of too late at this point? Maybe that's something that happens down the road.
No, absolutely. And more our sponsor collaborators want to post early trials that are not finalized because they want to hear from the community of sites. Is this feasible? Will this hurt our enrollment? Is it something we'll be able to accomplish? Because the fact is enrollment rates are on the decline in many disease areas. Competition is high. So if the protocol can be written in a way that is, more conducive to being successful when it's actually available for sites to work on, it's better for all parties involved. So we're seeing this more and more from our sponsor collaborators, and that's why we built this new section for upcoming trials to give that transparency and visibility to sites.
Yeah, no, again, I love that. I think everyone benefits. The earlier everyone can start throwing in some insight, into these. So again, no, that's very cool.
And the final section, before I jump into what the specific trial looks like, is the applications in progress. So what we're doing here is we try to make it as easy as possible for sites to see what are the key actions that they have to be taking on the different trials they're pursuing. So for this one, for example, you have the ones that are at the CDA stage. So the site here has to sign the CDA and review the protocol. We try to be very transparent on the timelines to make sure that the sites are not missing a trial that could be exciting. And if you scroll down, you basically have the same idea on now where are the opportunities that they have completed the application for, where are we in the review process. And the reason why this is really important, and this is what we've heard from sites, is historically they've been really kept in the dark. Once they have basically send back the feasibility questionnaire, they get no feedback for a month, 2 months, and then typically the sponsor comes back and says, well, great, you're selected, and they expect the initial commitment to not have changed despite maybe a few months passing by. So we really try to be super transparent and come back to the site as fast as possible to make sure that if they're committing to a trial, we're not keeping them waiting on this application.
And again, I think, you'll hear it from sites for sure. You send off a feasibility and it's just kind of gone in the ether, sometimes, that can be difficult to track as a site. When this is a question I'll, have later, because historically sites have also taken a sort of real shotgun approach to, trial opportunities. And sometimes that can make them difficult to track, and even more difficult to track down the status of where they're at. So again, to have a sort of a home base here where you can really go like a CRM. I mean, you can see what step it's on along the way, and kind of helps you keep and manage your pipeline, which is, super important especially a small site. You want to keep your pipeline full and your opportunities, as many opportunities in the chamber as you can get. So again, I really appreciate that you can get a quick update just on one page.
Yeah, and the shotgun piece is really tricky because we've had a lot of sponsor feedback saying we can't trust sites when they say something, then down the line it changes. And it's definitely linked to the fact that sites do have to think about their pipeline. They do have to think about more than one trial at a time. And this is our solution, hopefully, to the best of both worlds, of not having sites spread too thin across too many trials, but still allowing them to have the visibility to see, okay, if this one is falling short, there's another one that's waiting for me just after.
Well, I also think, whether this is like intentional part of it, the transparency helps sites a lot too, because I think, as you probably well know, like you get such tiny snippets sometimes of information about these trials. So you are like, well, let's just take it. And then we'll be able to really see what's happening. Then we can see, because frankly, even though I feel like more often than not, sites try their best. They want to be accurate. They don't want to look like idiots later. But sometimes you just don't know until you get pretty knee deep in a protocol, whether there's something there that's going to completely destroy it for you. So the more you can learn and the earlier you can learn it, can really make a big difference. And I think especially here, you've got a place you can go back, review it. It's all here in one spot. You're not trying to find emails because it's been turned over from 3 different people on the sponsor side and you can't keep track of it. So to be able to have it in one place and to have it early, I think is really undervalued, or maybe underappreciated from the site side. So I think that will also maybe help the process out to some degree. So again, I love that.
Yeah, and in the feasibility process, what we heard from sites is they don't know if they're going to get another feasibility questionnaire for a certain disease or indication. So if they get one, they'll apply for it, and then maybe next month they get a better one for a protocol that's more interesting for them and their patients. So this is really trying to avoid that. If we could have greater transparency for future studies and have multiple ones in the same indication, where you can actually say, actually, this is the one I think is best for my UC patients, or this is the one that's best for my atopic dermatitis patients, then you can really invest time in that right protocol for you and your patients, and not need to take one that you weren't in, it wasn't the perfect one for you, but it was the only one you had at the time. So you wanted to not lose that opportunity to have that trial. So this is really, trying to provide that steady flow of trials for sites so they can pick the right ones for them and their patients, instead of the other way around, where you're waiting to see what feasibilities come in.
Yeah, again, it's seemingly subtle shift, but I think really, again, it's pretty powerful when you think about it. And we've been in that exact same situation. UC is a perfect example. Like there's a lot of studies. They're hard to find patients for. So you want to be pretty precise, but at the same time, you feel pressured to take. We've had sponsors literally. We've said, we don't know this is a great fit, and they said, well, will you please take it anyway? Which I thought was kind of funny, but it puts sites in a funny position sometimes, because again, we want to be successful. We want to do a good job for everyone, but it's just not always. It's not easy. It's not as easy when things aren't as transparent. So I appreciate it. I appreciate that it's creating at least a little bit greater level of transparency.
Yeah, and I was just seeing a comment on LinkedIn about the fact that the amendments to the protocol also have a really big impact on the commitments. And that's a really important piece of what we're building. It's not meant to be a one point in time assessment. It's very much an iterative process, and we stick with sites all the way to the LPI. And the reason why we do this is we want to build a long-term partnership with sites where they can build their track record on the platform, they can showcase it, and they can progressively grow their business through Inato. And this aspect of logging in, what were the changes, what was the impact on the enrollment potential, this is really, really key to building this track record. Because what we've typically heard from sponsors is, we know sites that are always doing terribly, and there are very, very few of those sites. And in the middle, typically sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. And the only information they have is the screening, the enrollment. They have literally no context added to this on, okay, the site didn't do great this time. Why is that? Was there a change in the protocol? Was there a cohort that closed and reduced by 50% the number of eligible patients? And none of this exists, which means that even though sponsors have a ton of past performance data, they literally have no idea what to do with it. It's either you blacklist a few sites that are terrible, and this is hopefully less than 1% of sites, and the rest, it's who knows.
No, I mean, again, that's such a seemingly simple concept. Provide context, right? I mean, it's not just all data, and that, data, big data, great, cool, we should use it. But there's a lot of context there that gets missed if we're not even tracking it or keeping up with it. So again, it seems so obvious when you say it out loud, but it's something that, we've been sorely lacking. So again, I like.
Yeah, we're about doing very obvious stuff. That's our product philosophy.
Well, yeah, for better or worse, there's still a lot of obvious things that need addressed in this industry. So that's, you're in the right place for it.
Let me shift to what a protocol actually looks like on the platform. So as a site, you're going into, okay, this phase 2-3 in DLE looks interesting. Once you've signed the CDA, this is what you're going to have access to. So it's typically a simplified, digitized version of the protocol. You can also download the full protocol, but the idea here is to make it as easy as possible for the site to decide based on the study design, based on the key protocol challenges expected by the sponsor, based on the IE criteria, etc. Do I believe that it's even worth pursuing, yes or no? And on top of what you would typically find in the protocol, we encourage the sponsor to be as transparent as possible on what they believe will be the challenges, so the sites can position themselves. So here, for example, you have the expected study screen failure rate, and typically this is going to go all the way to sharing expectations of timelines, of number of patients enrolled, etc. And again, it's the same idea of, if the sponsor is looking for at least 4 patients, let's be upfront. This way, if a site believes they cannot do 4 patients, there's no point wasting any time applying to the study.
Yeah, again, a lot of basic context here you think would be, more clear, but generally is not. A lot of this stuff isn't real clear. And I think you also scroll back up to the very top, if you would. Keep going. You can print this page. So, I mean, you can, look, especially if we're fielding a lot of feasibility questionnaires, I want my physician or team to be in the loop with what's going on, but they're not maybe going to read all 150 pages of a protocol. So you've got a really nice cross-section of useful information here. So being able to even just use this page rather than, I can't tell you how many times I've gone and copied random sections out of a protocol, and I'm piecing together my own insane looking document that I'm sending around to my team. So to have it all here again is a huge advantage to be able to sort of have it all in front of you. Again,
yeah, and
maybe it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is.
Yeah, and you can share this between the PI and the study coordinator and the BD person. So this is very much collaborative. So you have different access for the different people, and they can just send the link and go directly where the information needs to be shared.
Love it.
Okay, so if this site isn't interested, this is where we get the feedback of why aren't you interested, and we're going to tweak the future recommendation. And if this site is interested, the first step that we call the check your fit for sites is an extremely short step, a couple minutes, where the idea again is, do you have the minimal requirements to be considered by the sponsor? So this is somewhat independent of are you interested, is do you have the minimal requirements? And most of the information, if we have it based on the past studies, again, is going to be pre-filled. So you have the existing PIs at the site. we're going to be checking, so who's going to be the PI for the study, what's their specialty. If we have this information on the capabilities of the sites, all this is pre-filled. I'll just add the time it takes for a site to activate. I'll say, no, I do not have industry-sponsored trials, industry-sponsored experience in rheumatology in the past 10 years. I'll go with a first assessment of number of patients in the disease. And once I'm done with this, I can just click and I immediately get a first assessment of, is this trial worth pursuing or not? So the site can then at this point decline, or if they believe they can still share with the sponsor why they should be considered, they can still continue. We do not want to be a gatekeeper. So if the site wants to continue, they can continue.
Again, I mean, I love that addition. I mean, you guys know too, there's trade-offs, right? Sometimes like maybe there isn't something we have a ton of experience with, but we have a great team or whatever reason that you may be able to make a case. And again, usually, by the time you hear that you weren't selected, if you do, I mean, you don't get any chance to, it's not a conversation, right? It's not an exchange of information. It's, you put some answers down on a piece of paper and you hope that they're interpreted in a way that's, of benefit to you. But on the flip side of that, as we talked about, sites have a tendency to sort of overextend and try to get to trials that maybe aren't. So I kind of love the recommendation, like, hey man, don't, maybe this isn't a good fit for you. At least gives you a trigger point to have to stop and like rethink about it rather than just send off blindly send off a feasibility questionnaire. And then, maybe it's bad that you do win it, do you think, and I think maybe there's been some sites have felt like if they decline trial opportunities, is that going to be like held against them later? You would think that sponsors would appreciate sites being upfront and being like, hey, this isn't a good fit for us. But I still think there's a little bit of maybe hesitancy to just straight up turn one down. Do you have any kind of comments around that?
Yeah, so I actually think it's a really good thing to turn down studies. And when we ask sites the reason for decline, this ends up being super valuable to the sponsors. So when you do turn down a study, we'll ask you why, and you can provide some rationale for the reason. And there's often really good insights we can then share back to the sponsors, maybe about their protocol design, maybe about how their trials perceived from a competitive landscape perspective. That could then help them position for what are our optimal sites to go forward. At the end of the day, no one really wants to have a study of a lot of low or non-performing sites. So the more we can be transparent and upfront and have that dialogue during this process, I think it's the better off for everyone involved. Now, sponsors don't like to hear your protocol is difficult. However, it's really important feedback. So, we are very transparent with our sponsor collaborators, just like we are with the sites that we work with, to say, this is really important feedback and you should consider. And I think it's the main driver why many sponsors are now coming earlier to us to post their trials instead of waiting for the protocol to be final.
I think it gives sites an opportunity to be precise too about why it wouldn't be a good protocol for them, or why the protocol may be difficult in ways that haven't been considered yet. Because it's really easy to get a protocol, not do well, and like, well, this protocol sucks. It's not us. The protocol's bad. Well, that's not really useful feedback from a site, right? Like, it's kind of, if we all want to play nice in the sandbox, I think we have to give concise and accurate reasons why, and then it's up after that, it's up to the sponsor to consider. But at least we've done our part to help, hopefully, make things better and bring things up to the top that maybe hadn't been considered previously. And I'm gonna take just a quick pause really quick as we're getting down towards the end, or that last half of the hour here, you guys. I know there's a lot of you listening, a lot of you watching right now, because I can see the numbers. So please feel free to throw in your comments and questions as we sort of continue up here on the last half. Sorry, Liz.
Yeah, no worries. I was just going to share that the sponsors are becoming also really open to helping sites if they're missing some key capabilities or staff. So that's another really important dialogue that we can have. If the study's interesting and you have the right patients, but there's something you're missing that would, be preventing you from joining the trial, knowing that through this process we can advocate then to fill those gaps for sites with the sponsor. And many sponsors have become very open to it. Improving access to patients in their community where they live close to home is a key priority. So if you are missing some capabilities and that comes out through this process, often the sponsors are very willing to support sites to make sure that they can improve that access to patients in the community. So I think that's a really important part of the process as well, is knowing exactly what those details are that you might be missing so we can help advocate for you. And we have a site partnership management team that's excellent, that works with the sites to understand those challenges and then can really advocate for the sponsors for that support.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. Again, if we really want to continue to push the needle and move things along, I think we need that, right? Because not every site can do everything all the time. I think that's okay. But if we can talk about it, figure out what kind of support can be provided, obviously that opens up a lot of doors. And it's win-win, right? I mean, it's not just a win for sites, it's a win for sponsors if they can help develop new sites. I mean, that's going to be great for them too.
Yeah, and what you don't see in the page we were just on is those requirements are designed hand in hand with the sponsors, and we have a lot of discussions with them, telling them, okay, well, if you add 5 years versus 2 years of experience in past industry sponsored trials, this is going to eliminate 90% of sites versus 50% of sites. So we try to kind of pull them away from the ideal dream world site to, okay, what does the landscape actually look like, and what is the actual cost of coming up with higher and higher requirements. And honestly, the sponsors have been great at this. They have changed quite a lot. I remember when we started, we often heard the condition to work with us is to have worked with us in the past, which was really kind of this catch-22. And now it's very different. We're hearing a lot of sponsors really excited about naive sites. I think the competition issue has gotten so bad that they want more naive sites, they want untapped patient pools, etc.
Nice. Yeah, and that does speak to one of the questions, someone did ask as far as sponsors working with, sites or PIs that don't have experience but have staff with your. And again, I see this a lot, especially when there are people like myself out there, been in the industry a long time, trying to wrangle in new PIs. I mean, it's the whole thing. We're setting ourselves up for like a weird paradox, right? It's like doctors are one and done, or we keep going back to the same sites, and we got to be willing to take on new PIs. And I think the best condition you can do that with is with the staff around you that really knows what they're doing. So surely you guys have seen the same. I mean, I've seen sponsors starting to open their doors a little bit to newer PIs, especially if there's a strong team with a track record behind them.
Yeah. 100%. I completely agree. And I think we really are representing the whole research team through this process, not just the PI, which is really important.
And let's be honest, it's probably not the PIs filling this out, right? I mean, it's usually someone on the research team. I mean, that's, it's a me or a Beatty guy or whatever the case may be. So yeah.
And then we're trying to find the right trials. So maybe, phase 1 early oncology isn't the right fit for a new PI. So how do we match you to the right trial to get that track record and experience under your belt so that you could move in the direction of research interest that you have? So I think that's also an important part. Not every site PI combination is the right fit for every trial. So how do we match you to the right ones through our process so that you have more success and can build that track record?
Okay, so going back to the flow. So the first step, this is what Liz was highlighting. So we typically have the assessment of the team experience, the different contacts, etc. So again, we are pre-filling the information with all the information we already have available at the site. So we can go through the team setup, the capabilities at the site. This is pre-filled. The experience, once you fill it, you can then go back and add any past trial that you have shared with us in the past. And you can basically, this is where the site is in the driver's seat. The site can decide what are the experiences that I believe are the most relevant and I want to showcase for this specific study. So the site can add a new one or choose an old one. And then once this is done, we have a short assessment of competition, and that's basically it for the first step, which is really about who is going to be running the trial at the site. The second step is going to be the patient preview. There it seems that, okay. So I'll just skip this step rapidly. Yeah, so the second step about the patient preview, we have a very big focus on diversity. So this site has already filled the information on diversity. What we have, and this is also shown to the sponsor, is the freshness of the information. And beyond just the diversity of the patients at the site and around the site, we really allow the site to showcase what are they putting in place at the site to help in terms of outreach. So do they have specific programs? What is the makeup of the team, et cetera, et cetera? And this is really becoming a bigger and bigger driver of sponsors deciding to work with sites that have less experience.
Yeah, I mean, you're just giving sites an opportunity to at least put forward maybe something unique about them, which again, in this case, may be that they have a particularly diverse patient population. And so again, I love that, being able to sort of proactively present that.
Yeah, and you don't have to be from day one a super expert site in terms of diversity. What is, for example, already going to be pre-filled for you is the breakdown of the ethnicity around your site. So this already gives you kind of a base of how am I comparing versus the average in the US. And this is going to be a stepping stone to then maybe think a bit more about the makeup of your team, think about the outreach programs. And what we do for site is we've standardized this by awarding diversity medals. So you can start with the bronze medal and you get a sense of, okay, what is the next step to become silver, to become gold? And this is something that, again, the sponsors really, really love, and it's a massive driver to get access to more studies.
Yeah, no, again, I love that.
Yeah, and we've heard from a lot of sites where they do have really close ties with certain populations in their community, that they're really proud to share that information. So where they're not represented by the census data, where their specific population is unique to them and the patients that they see, they want to share that. And we have many sites who maybe the staff speaks Spanish and they serve a Spanish-speaking community in their area very uniquely, or they have close ties with the Native American community and can really, change the dynamics of what the census data looks like compared to the actual population of patients they see. So this gives them a chance to showcase that, talk about their staff and languages spoken and all that community outreach work that they do holistically. That's not trial by trial, but really about engagement in their community that they're really proud of and doing, really great work to improve access to underserved patient population.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. And again, you don't always get that opportunity in your sort of, run-of-the-mill feasibility. So again, I think sites will appreciate that.
So maybe I'll jump to the last page, which is what the sponsors see for the interest of time. So this view is available both to the sponsor and the sites. And the idea here really is to work with sites to showcase their capabilities. So the site can review this before we submit it to the sponsor. And at the top of the page, the really important concept from the sponsor side is what we call the Inato verified commitment. This is the number of patients that were standing behind the site and saying, we're confident that the site can deliver 3 patients, which doesn't mean that they cannot do more. They can be budgeted with the sponsor to aim for a higher number. But this is really the number we want to stand behind, and we want the site to then be able to say, this is what I committed to in the past. I did deliver, and I'm building this consistent track record of reliable performance.
Yeah, again, really nice to have all that sort of right here in one spot where, again, you're not getting anything close to this in the more traditional feasibility process.
Yeah, and what the product team has done that I find quite interesting is it's very much inspired by what Airbnb has done where the concept fundamentally is the same, is you don't really know this place you could stay at, and you're trying to build the trust necessary to take a gamble. And so the way this is structured is basically at the top, we want the sponsor to get excited. This is the potential of the site. They have a gold diversity medal. This gets me excited enough that I actually want to scroll down. And the next step beyond this is the requirements. And this is really key for the sponsor to say, okay, we have aligned with Inato and with the sites on the minimal requirements to be considered. Everything has been checked. The equipment has been checked. The assessment of the team has been checked. We have feedback from our team internally of why do we believe the team is capable. And once they have this, they can then dig into more details. And we don't need to go into all the details, but basically, typically what we're going to show is then the structure of the team. Everything can be reused again, the CVs of the team, etc., where the site is located. And then we have the track record of the site, their enrollment estimation, the focus on diversity, the motivation, the study startup, etc. And this is a very holistic view. And the feedback we've gotten from sponsors is it looks at all the different dimensions that really drive enrollment potential. And this alone is sufficient for them to make a bet on the site they don't know.
I mean, I think the Airbnb analogy is really apt when you think about it. I mean, you're using the data essentially to help build trust in a relationship, right? And I feel like I've said this before, but I think the tools that are going to be the most valuable in the space are going to be those that use technology to build relationships, you know, and those two parts together, because neither one is really sufficient by itself. I think we've sometimes tend to pendulum between the two, but having something that really brings both together and under one umbrella here and under one platform is a big, again, can be, you know, a big game changer.
Yeah, and what is exciting, honestly, for us, similar to Airbnb, is this flywheel that gets going. Because the more we have information on sites, the better we're able to recommend the right trial to them. The sponsors, now we're getting at a point where we've shown really good results on the first batch of sites that were selected on Inato. So we're going from one trial with a sponsor to 10 to 20 trials. So yeah, the exciting piece is really seeing that the early proof of the high performance of those community sites is driving massive growth on the number of trials available for those sites.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense. It's all becomes a little circular after a while in a good way. You know, it's all feeding. And you know that as a site, generally, once you start to create a good relationship with a sponsor, they keep coming back. And again, you just keep strengthening that. And this kind of is a little nice, it's almost like a hack to get there, right? You don't necessarily have to, you still got to put in the time and put in the effort, but this can be done in the course of a month rather than 3 years to start developing that relationship. So if you're good, I'm going to go ahead and pull the demo off unless you have anything else you want to show.
No, we're good.
We're getting down to the last 10 minutes or so. And, I got to ask a couple of kind of tougher questions, beat you guys up a little bit, which wouldn't be me. I mean, look, a lot of sites here, this is free for sites, right? So I know sometimes it's suspicious, makes sites suspicious. Like, what's happening? Are you guys SMO? Or are you going to be pulling budgets off the top that would normally go to sites? Can you speak at all to sort of like what your business model is, just for those that are interested? Like, what's I assume, you're really being, you're working through the sponsors, where there's a lot of value. So, I mean, what can you say about your business model?
So we are absolutely free for sites. The way it works is very simple, is we have a fixed fee that is paid initially at the study level by the sponsors, and then we get paid on the performance basis. So this is where the idea behind the business model is aligning the interest of the sites, of the sponsor, and of Inato. So if the site succeeds, we get paid. If the site do not succeed, we get paid a lot less.
But you guys, I mean, in a way, again, I love this because you guys have a vested interest in the success of the sites that you are working with. So it's not, and again, we see this in other areas, like, maybe patient referrals sometimes is like you get a bunch of bad leads, right? And you're like, cool, I had to make a lot of phone calls, but none of those were appropriate leads at all. So I love models that sort of keep everybody's incentives aligned in a way that's actually beneficial. So, you guys want your sites to succeed, right? The ones that you're working with. So I think that provides just a little extra level of care in the whole, sort of, I don't know, triangle between, you guys, sponsor and site. So I love that.
And we don't want to take money away from sites because we know that they're already on pretty thin budgets. They don't have a lot of runway for most sites. And so what we want is for a site that we're doing one trial with today, we want to do 20 with them in the future. So we want to make sure that the money they're making on a given study, they can reinvest this in the future. So we're not taking any money from sites today. We have no plans of doing it in the future.
Yeah.
No, again, I like that.
Yeah, and the model only improves for all of us as more trials get posted. So as the sites perform and the sponsors are happy, they then unlock more trials to get posted. We envision a world where sites can get a steady flow of trials from Inato alone. That you don't need to fill out feasibility questionnaires anymore, that the trials are available, you can pick the ones that are right for you and your patients, and it's really efficient. So you can focus on executing the trials and patient care instead of worrying about, well, I have a next trial in UC in the third quarter when this one ends. So,
yeah,
I think
I'd like that too.
Yeah.
Instead of all the random ways, chasing down an MSL in the hallway so I can talk to them about trial opportunities. Not that I'll ever stop doing that, but again, the way sites find studies is so sort of like sometimes seemingly random and disparate. So to have a place that you could rely on to at least some degree would be a huge improvement over what we've seen. And to speak to that, I mean, I've talked to sites who are getting on Inato. They're disappointed they haven't gotten any trial matches yet or haven't gotten anything awarded. What would you say, to those sites?
Yeah, so we're seeing a really big uptick this year in the number of trials that will be on Inato. So those initial trials have been very successful with our initial sponsors. We did have a focus on sort of the big sponsors, the top 30 sponsors to start. And now we're seeing, we just announced recently this last month, like Sanofi's posting all of their I&I trials on Inato going forward. We're moving into mid-market. We're also working with a CRO partner. So you'll see the volume of trials is going to increase significantly this year. And we think that will only help sites find that right match and make sure they can get actually selected on a trial through Inato. So we're super excited about the scale of trials that will happen on the platform this year that should really alleviate this problem we've had in the past where we were just getting the model started, because that flywheel is working now and more trials are coming.
Well, and I still think if I had to guess, there's probably still a little bit of a culture change, I guess, in terms of, this is not the normal way things are done. So I think it's probably still going to take some time, I'm guessing, just for everybody to get on the same page. And you guys haven't been around forever. You're still working it out. So, I can appreciate that and realize that it's not going to necessarily flip overnight. I also know you guys have closed on some fundraising and raising capital. Are you guys looking what else are you guys looking to do here in the future? Are you going to continue expanding or getting into some different areas maybe?
Yeah, so we are expanding both in Europe and in the US. So we're very global in nature. We have about sites in about 60 countries. And so most of the money of the fundraise is going to go into growing the number of sites, growing the number of sponsors, and improving the product. And to your point on the number of trials available, for example, one of the big investment areas for us is better closing the loop with the sites, meaning, okay, maybe you were not selected in this first study. We want to make sure that we're very transparent and thoughtful about what have we learned from this? Is it worth pursuing another one? Or when are we going to be able to come back to you with future studies? Because to your point, it's not going to be flipping a switch and suddenly every site has access to all the trials imaginable. So yeah, we're very thoughtful about what's the best path to get there.
Well, fair. And I think, again, if you're a site, you got to give a little bit of grace on that too. Again, it's not going to just, studies aren't going to start landing in your lap it's still going to be a little bit of a process. And I think, again, I can understand and appreciate that. Well, cool. I mean, we're getting down here to the last couple of minutes. Anything else you guys want to kind of end with? I mean, I think, first of all, I mean, I really appreciate anyone who comes on here and is willing to sort of show their work. I think it's something we don't see enough in the industry. And this is something that has obviously kind of close to my heart, just because that's so much value for sites and solves a lot of the sort of, quote unquote, simple problems that, we've discussed throughout this. So I really do appreciate you guys putting yourselves out there and coming on.
Yeah, I mean, a closing note for me is, we're really built for sites, and we love hearing from sites about what's working, what's not. So feedback is welcome. If you're on Inato and you have ideas, let us know. Our product team's always looking to talk with more sites and hear ways that we can make life easier for you all to find that right trial match. So I would say, keep in mind we're built for sites. We're here trying to make the product really be a great experience for sites. So the more we can hear from you all, the better.
All right, you heard him, guys. Get after him. All right. Well, I mean, Kourosh, anything you want to end with, man?
No, I think that was a great closing comment.
Good. Perfect. All right. So where can people find Inato? Where can they go? Where can they sign up?
So they can go on inato.com. And again, it's a very simple sign-up process, and you'll very rapidly see if there are trials available for you. And they can also really reach out to us. We're always super happy to talk with sites directly. We're really building, to Liz's point, the product roadmap with sites. So our virtual office door is always open.
Nice. Yep. Very cool. You guys, check it out. Inato.com. Again, I really appreciate you guys coming on, and maybe have to have you come back here after a while, and we start to see more sites get onboarded, and see where you guys are in a couple of years.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Brad. This was great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Make sure to check out Note to File podcast for all of our live streams, as well as our audio podcasts. And that's about as much of a plug as I'm going to give. So thanks, guys.